I leaned back in the chair, scrolling through photos of last night's exhibit. My phone buzzed Lucas again. "You coming home tonight or crashing at Jason's?" His text was direct. "No, I miss you, no love you, just logistics." It was typical for Lucas, but lately it grated on me. We had been living together for years, yet somehow I felt like a guest in my own life. "Yeah, I'll be home," I typed back, staring at the screen longer than necessary, hoping for some feeling that wasn't just routine. When I walked into the apartment, Lucas was at the counter, reading over some reports. He didn't even look up. "Hey," I called. "Hey," he muttered without lifting his head. I dropped my bag onto the couch. Long day. Same as always, he flipped another page, barely acknowledging me. I wanted to say something, to call him out on the distance between us, but what was the point? The apartment was pristine, as always, the kind of clean you only got when someone's too busy to live in it. It felt more like a showroom than a home. I hated it, but at least it was ours, or used to be. "I'm grabbing a drink. Want one?" "No, I'm good." The usual. Silence settled between us, thick enough to choke on. I poured myself a scotch, watching him out of the corner of my eye. Was this what we'd become? Two people sharing a space, nothing more? Are we still good? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Lucas finally looked up, eyebrows raised like I'd just asked the stupidest question in the world. "What do you mean?" I swallowed the frustration that bubbled up. "I don't know. Things just feel different." He shrugged, eyes back on his papers. "We're fine, James, just busy." Busy, that was his excuse for everything. But fine. Not even close. And deep down, we both knew it. I barely slept that night, the silence between us louder than ever. The next morning, I found Lucas sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his coffee. I grabbed a mug and joined him. "You all right?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We need to talk." His voice was flat, like he'd rehearsed it. I froze mid-pour. "About what?" He looked up, finally meeting my eyes. "About us." The pit in my stomach tightened. I sat down across from him, my heart already knowing what was coming. "All right, talk." He took a deep breath, like he was bracing himself. "I don't think this is working anymore." I blinked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What isn't working?" "Us," he said plainly. "We're just not right for each other." It felt like the ground had dropped out beneath me. "What the hell are you talking about, Lucas? We've been together for years. You don't just wake up one day and decide we're not right." "But I've been thinking about it for a while," he said, his tone irritatingly calm. "We're different, James, too different." I slammed my mug down on the table, coffee sloshing over the side. "Different how? We've known each other since high school. What's changed?" He rubbed his temples, clearly annoyed. "Everything. You're focused on your photography, and I'm drowning in work. We don't connect anymore." I stared at him, disbelief coursing through me. "That's it? We're just too busy?" "Come on, Lucas, that's bullshit. There's something else." His eyes darted away, confirming my suspicion. "It's more than that." I leaned in, voice low. "Then what is it? Just say it." He sighed, like he'd been waiting for this. "I've been seeing someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened as I tried to process what he'd just said. Someone else? It didn't make sense. Who? My voice was barely a whisper. "Does it matter?" he muttered, clearly wanting the conversation to end. "Who, Lucas?" I demanded, anger flooding in now. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. It was written all over his face. "It's a guy," he finally said, almost too quietly. I sat there stunned. "A guy?" My mind raced, trying to reconcile this with everything I thought I knew about Lucas. "So what? You're gay now?" "I'm figuring it out," he said, standing up, the conversation apparently over for him. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, you failed," I shot back, standing too, the chair screeching against the floor. "How long has this been going on?" "A couple of months," he said it so casually, like he was confessing to stealing office supplies, not cheating on me with some random guy. I stood there, staring at him, the betrayal sinking deeper with every second of silence. "Get out," I said, my voice cold. What? He looked genuinely surprised. I said, "Get the hell out, Lucas." Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and left, the door slamming behind him. I stood there in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the table, my knuckles white. I didn't even realize I was shaking until the mug I was holding shattered on the floor. The door slammed, and for a few seconds I stood there staring at the space Lucas had just occupied. The echo of his words, "I've been seeing someone else," kept ringing in my ears. My body felt numb, like someone had ripped my insides out and left me hollow. I kicked the broken mug aside and slumped into a chair, my hands shaking. What the hell just happened? 1 minute we were talking about being busy, and the next, he's leaving me for some guy? I grabbed my phone, fingers hovering over his contact. I wanted to call him, scream at him, demand more answers, but I stopped myself. What good would that do? He had already made up his mind, and I wasn't about to beg. Instead, I tossed my phone onto the table and stared at the blank wall across from me. How did I not see this coming? The days after the breakup blurred together. Lucas had packed up his things, left the apartment in silence. and I was alone. For the first time in years, the place felt like a museum, cold, empty, untouched. I kept expecting to hear the door creak open and see him walk back in like it was all a mistake. But he didn't. And that's when it hit me, Lucas was gone. Really gone? I found myself avoiding home as much as possible. I spent nights out at bars, galleries, anywhere but that sterile apartment. One night, after too many drinks, I ended up crashing at Jason's place. "You look like shit," Jason said, handing me a glass of water the next morning. He wasn't the type to sugarcoat things. "You haven't been home in days. What's going on?" I rubbed my face, trying to chase away the hangover. "Lucas left." Jason paused mid-sip of his coffee. "What do you mean, left?" "He's gone," I muttered, staring at the floor, "for good." Jason set his coffee down, looking genuinely surprised. "What the hell? You two were solid." "Did he say why?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, turns out he's been seeing some guy." Jason's eyes widened. "No fucking way, Lucas." "Yeah, shocker, right?" "Dude." He didn't know what to say. "That's rough." "No shit." Jason leaned back, shaking his head. "So, what now?" I shrugged. "I don't know, I can't stay in that place." "Everything reminds me of him?" He nodded slowly, then glanced at me. "Look, man, if you need a new roommate, I know someone looking." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Who?" "Ethan. You met him at my last party. Cool guy, needs a place to crash." I vaguely remembered Ethan, a tall, good-looking guy with a carefree attitude. "Great, just what I need," I thought sarcastically. But at this point, the idea of sharing the apartment with anyone felt better than facing that suffocating emptiness. "I don't know, man," I hesitated. "Just meet him. He's chill. You'll like him." I sighed. "Yeah, maybe. I'll think about it." Jason nodded, giving me a reassuring slap on the back. "You'll get through this, man. And if Lucas shows up, tell him to fuck off." I cracked a small smile. "Will do." I hadn't planned on meeting Ethan so soon, but Jason pushed. "Just get it over with," he texted me like he was doing me a favor. I wasn't in the mood to deal with anyone, but the thought of going back to that empty apartment alone made me cave. When Ethan knocked on the door, I opened it to find him leaning against the frame, grinning like we were old friends. "James, right?" "Yeah," I said, stepping aside to let him in. He had that easygoing vibe, the kind of guy who'd walk into a room and instantly make himself at home. His hoodie and ripped jeans made him look out of place in the sterile apartment, but somehow I didn't mind. Ethan glanced around, giving a low whistle. "Nice place." Jason wasn't kidding. "It's something," I muttered, already feeling the weight of the place as I closed the door behind him. "You want a drink?" "And sure," he said, following me to the kitchen. "So, Jason told me you're into photography. I'm a bit of an art geek myself." "Yeah? What do you do?" "I'm a tattoo artist," he said, with a casual shrug like it was no big deal. "Started off with sketching, now I ink people for a living. Pays the bills." "Interesting." I grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, handing one to him. He cracked it open without hesitation. "Not as fancy as photography, but it's a living." I laughed lightly. "Not sure how fancy photography is, but it keeps me busy." He took a sip, then leaned against the counter, eyeing me curiously. "So what's the deal?" "Jason said you needed a roommate. What happened to the last one?" I paused, gripping my beer a little tighter. He moved out. Ethan raised an eyebrow, sensing there was more to the story. "That's it?" "Yeah, that's it," I said, not in the mood to spill my breakup story to someone I barely knew. He held up his hands, backing off. "Fair enough. None of my business." For a moment, we stood in silence, the apartment feeling less oppressive with someone else in it. Ethan didn't seem to mind the quiet, which was a relief. "You know," he said after a beat, "I don't really need much space. Just a room and some quiet to work. I won't get in your way." "That's fine," I replied, taking another swig. "There's a spare bedroom. You can check it out if you want." Ethan followed me down the hall. I opened the door to the guest room, a blank, sterile space with nothing but white walls and a bed that Weddy's parents had probably bought. Ethan looked around, nodding thoughtfully. "I can make this work," he said, tossing his hoodie onto the bed like he was already moving in. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "So is that a yes?" "Yeah," he grinned, turning to face me. "You're stuck with me." That night, I sat on the couch after Ethan left to grab his stuff, staring at the empty space where Lucas used to sit. I couldn't help but think how different Ethan was from him. Lucas was all structure and routine. Ethan was chaos wrapped in a grin. But maybe that was exactly what I needed, something unpredictable. Ethan moved in the next day, and the change in the apartment was immediate. It didn't feel like a museum anymore. His energy filled the space, almost overwhelming at first, but in a good way. The silence that had suffocated me since Lucas left was replaced by Ethan's music, his laughter, and his constant chatter about art and tattoos. One evening I came home to find Ethan sitting on the couch sketching something in a worn-out notebook. He glanced up, smiling. "How was your day?" I shrugged, tossing my bag onto the floor. "Same old. Went to a gallery, took some shots, grabbed a coffee. You?" I had a couple of clients this morning. Then I figured I'd mess around with some new designs. He closed the notebook, sitting up. "Wanna see?" "Sure," I said, sitting down next to him. He flipped open the book and showed me a series of intricate sketches, some abstract, others detailed portraits. "These are incredible." "Thanks," he said, grinning. "It's just something I mess around with when I'm not tattooing. Honestly, half of this stuff will never make it to skin." "You should do something more with these," I said, flipping through the pages. "Ever thought about an exhibit or something?" Ethan laughed. "Exhibit? Come on, man, I'm not that kind of artist. I ink people, not canvases. But you're the one who could have an exhibit. How's the photography going?" I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "It's fine, I guess, a couple of projects here and there, but nothing's really taken off the way I thought it would." Ethan nodded, staring at me thoughtfully. "What are you trying to capture with your shots?" "I don't know," I admitted, rubbing my face. "Life, I guess, struggles, people in their rawest moments." "Yeah, but why?" he pressed. "What's the story behind it?" I frowned, not expecting him to dig so deep. Lucas never asked these kinds of questions. "I don't know. Maybe I'm still trying to figure that out." He nodded, but didn't push further. Instead, he shifted topics like he always did. "Hey, I'm starving. Want to grab some food?" I glanced at the clock. "It's late." So he grinned. "That's the best time to eat. Come on, there's this taco place down the street I've been dying to try." We ended up sitting in a hole-in-the-wall taco joint, the place buzzing with life even at midnight. Ethan devoured his food like he hadn't eaten in days while I picked at mine, still distracted by his earlier question about my photography. "You've got this intense look on your face," Ethan said between bites. "What's going on up there?" "Nothing," I muttered, shaking my head. "Just thinking." "Thinking too much, probably," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "You need to loosen up, man. Stop putting so much pressure on yourself." I gave him a sideways glance. "You say that like it's easy." "It can be," he said, leaning back in his chair. "If you stop giving a shit about what people think. Do what feels right for you, not for anyone else." I laughed, but there was something about what he said that stuck with me. "You really don't care what anyone thinks, do you?" "Not really," he said with a shrug. "Life's too short, you know." I didn't answer, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. I had spent so long trying to fit into this mold, to be something for Lucas, for my career, for everyone else. Ethan, on the other hand, just was comfortable in his skin, unapologetically himself. It was a freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became more than just a roommate. We spent every evening together, hitting up art galleries, grabbing drinks, talking about anything and everything. It felt easy, natural. But there was something else lurking beneath the surface, something I wasn't ready to face. One night, after a few too many beers at a local bar, we stumbled back to the apartment. Ethan was laughing at some stupid joke I'd made, and for a moment, I forgot about everything, Lucas, my work, all of it. "You're drunk," I teased, throwing myself onto the couch as he kicked off his shoes. "And you're not," he shot back, plopping down next to me. His knee brushed against mine, sending an unexpected jolt through me. I shifted, trying to play it cool, maybe a little. Ethan grinned, leaning back. "Man, I needed that. It's been a while since I just let loose like that." "Yeah, me too." I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye, suddenly aware of how close we were. My heart started pounding, and I couldn't figure out why. It wasn't like this was the first time we'd hung out like this. But tonight felt different. The room was quieter than usual, the buzz of the city outside barely breaking the tension building between us. I swallowed hard, trying to shake the feeling, but it wouldn't go away. "You good?" Ethan asked, his voice softer than before. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said quickly, but I wasn't. I was anything but fine. My thoughts were racing, my body reacting in ways I didn't understand. "This is stupid," I thought. "He's not into you. He's gay. He's your friend." But the more I tried to reason with myself, the stronger the feeling grew. I shifted again, pulling myself together. "I'm just tired," I lied. Ethan eyed me for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, me too. I should crash." He stood up, stretching, and I felt a weird pang of disappointment as the space between us grew. "Night, man." "Night," I muttered, watching him head down the hall to his room. The second his door clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My mind was a mess, the alcohol making it worse. I leaned forward, rubbing my face. "What the hell is wrong with me?" I whispered to myself. The next day, I couldn't shake the awkward tension from the night before. Ethan, though, seemed oblivious, carrying on as usual. We were sitting in the kitchen when he glanced up from his phone. "Hey, so I've got a gig tonight," he said casually. "Some friends are coming over after. You cool with that?" "Yeah, sure," I said, trying to act normal. "What kind of gig?" "Just a local band I'm tight with, doing some tattoos for their show." He flashed me that easy grin, and for a second, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen. "You should come," he added. "You could get some great shots for your portfolio." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep my distance until I sorted out whatever was going on in my head. But the other part of me, the part that felt that weird spark last night, didn't want to say no to him. "Yeah, maybe," I said, shrugging it off. "We'll see." That night, The apartment was buzzing with people. Ethan's friends were loud, filling the space with laughter and music. I stayed in the background, camera in hand, pretending I was there just to capture the scene, but my focus kept drifting back to him. The way he moved through the room, effortless, like he belonged in every space he occupied. At one point, he caught my eye from across the room, raising his beer in a silent toast. I raised mine back, forcing a smile, but the conflicting feelings from the night before were back, stronger than ever. I wasn't just not over Lucas, I was falling for Ethan, and that scared the hell out of me. The party wound down late. Ethan's friends slowly filtered out, leaving the apartment feeling strangely empty again. I was cleaning up the scattered beer bottles when Ethan came back into the living room, rolling his shoulders like he'd just finished a workout. "That was a good night," he said, plopping down on the couch, exhausted but still grinning. "Yeah, your friends are cool," I replied, tossing an empty can into the trash. My nerves were still buzzing, but I tried to act casual. I could feel Ethan's eyes on me as I grabbed another bottle from the table. "You didn't seem to have much fun, though," he said. "You've been weird all night?" I froze, my grip tightening around the bottle. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, man." He sat up, his grin fading as he watched me carefully. "You've been off lately, like distant. What's going on with you?" My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel the conversation steering toward dangerous territory, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But the way Ethan looked at me waiting, genuinely concerned, made it hard to lie. I swallowed hard and set the bottle down. "I don't know, man. I've just been thinking a lot." He frowned, leaning forward. "About what?" I hesitated, my mind racing. Every instinct told me to lie, to brush it off like I always did, but I couldn't keep dodging it. "Not with Ethan." "About you," I admitted quietly, avoiding his gaze. The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of my confession hanging between us, the air thick with tension. Ethan didn't say anything for a moment, and when I finally looked up, he was staring at me, his expression unreadable. "Me," he repeated, his voice soft but serious. "What about me?" I rubbed the back of my neck, nerves eating away at me. "I don't know. It's just, ever since you moved in, things feel different. I feel different." He stayed quiet, waiting for me to go on. I forced myself to keep talking, even though every word felt like stepping onto thin ice. "I think I'm confused," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "About us. About what this is." Ethan's eyes darkened, and I could see the gears turning in his head. He leaned back on the couch, letting out a slow breath. "James, I know you're gay," I cut him off, not wanting to make it more awkward than it already was. "I know that. I'm not trying to mess things up between us, but I can't shake this feeling, man. It's driving me crazy." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly taken off guard. "Jesus," he muttered. "I didn't expect this." "Me neither," I admitted, slumping into the chair opposite him. "I'm not even sure what I'm feeling half the time. It's just, when you're around, everything's different." Ethan stared at the floor for a long moment before finally looking back at me. "Look, James, I care about you, but you've got to understand this is complicated. I'm not used to being in situations like this." "Neither am I," said quickly. "I don't even know what this means." We sat in silence for what felt like forever, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the room. I braced myself for rejection, for Ethan to tell me I was out of line, but instead he surprised me. "I'm not going to lie," he said quietly. "I felt something too. I just didn't know how to deal with it." My heart skipped a beat. "You have?" "Yeah," he looked at me, his expression serious. "But this isn't something we can just dive into, man. You're still dealing with Lucas, and I don't want to be some rebound or some experiment for you." I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish," he said, his voice firm. "I like you, James, I do. But if we're going to figure this out, we need to be real with each other. No games, no confusion." I nodded, his words sinking in. He was right. This wasn't something I could rush into just because I was feeling lost after Lucas. Ethan wasn't some escape. He was more than that. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice small. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "For now, we take it slow. Let's just figure out what this is before we complicate things. Deal?" "Deal," I said, even though I knew nothing about this would be simple. We didn't talk about it for a while after that night, but the air between us shifted, subtle, but impossible to ignore. Every glance, every accidental brush of skin felt like a spark. It was like we were waiting for something to break, but neither of us was ready to make the first move. A week later, I was sitting in the living room sorting through some of my latest photos when Ethan walked in. He had just come back from a tattoo appointment, wiping ink from his hands with a rag. "Hey, what you're up to?" he asked, plopping down on the couch beside me. I could feel the heat from his body, too close for comfort. "Just going through some shots," I muttered, keeping my eyes on the laptop screen, though my heart was racing. Ethan leaned over, peering at the images. "These are good, man. You've got an eye for this stuff." "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but all I could think about was the way his shoulder brushed mine, the way his breath tickled the side of my neck. There was a long pause, the air between us heavy again, and I couldn't take it anymore. I closed the laptop with a click and turned to face him. "Ethan, we need to talk." He froze for a second, then leaned back on the couch, crossing his arms. "All right, talk. I opened my mouth, then hesitated. This thing between us, it's getting harder to ignore. Ethan's eyes darkened, and he let out a low sigh. Yeah, I know. I don't know what to do with it, I admitted, feeling the tension knotting up in my chest. I've never been in a situation like this before. You think I have? He shot back, a slight edge in his voice. James, this isn't easy for me either. I'm not saying it is, I said quickly, feeling the frustration build. I'm just lost, man. Every time we're in the same room, it feels like I'm fighting this, whatever this is. And it's driving me insane. Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he was going to shut down the conversation. But then he leaned forward, his voice low. What do you want from me, James? The question caught me off guard. I stared at him, not sure how to answer. I don't know. Well, you need to figure it out, he said, his voice growing rougher, because I can't keep playing this game with you. Either we're just roommates and friends, or we're something else. But this in-between shit, it's not working. I'm trying, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. But you're right. It's not working. I'm not sure what I want. I just know I don't want to lose you. He held my gaze, the intensity in his eyes making it hard to breathe. You won't lose me, he said, his voice softening. But we need to be real about this. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought he might get up and leave. But then he leaned in, just slightly. The distance between us shrank, and I could feel the pull like gravity pulling us closer. My heart pounded in my chest, louder than my thoughts. I don't want to screw this up, I whispered, my voice barely audible. You won't, Ethan said, his eyes locked on mine. But we've got to stop pretending this isn't happening. I swallowed hard, my body frozen, and before I could think twice, I closed the gap between us. Our lips brushed, hesitant at first, then deeper. It felt like everything else in the room disappeared, the world narrowing down to just him and me. He pulled back, his breath ragged, eyes searching mine for a second. So what now, he asked quietly. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that something had shifted between us and there was no going back. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We didn't talk much after that kiss, both of us retreating to our rooms, trying to process what had just happened. But I knew we couldn't stay in this limbo forever. Something had to give. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. The memory of last night was still fresh, Ethan's lips, the heat between us, the weight of everything we didn't say afterward. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into. It wasn't like we could pretend nothing happened, but the thought of facing him now made me feel like I was walking into a minefield. I dragged myself out of bed, threw on some clothes, and stepped into the kitchen, half hoping Ethan wouldn't be there. But of course he was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone like it was just another day. Morning, he said, not looking up. Morning, I muttered, grabbing a mug and pouring myself some coffee. I waited for him to say something, anything, about the kiss, but he didn't. The silence between us was thick, but neither of us seemed willing to break it. I finally cleared my throat. About last night. He glanced up from his phone, his face unreadable. Yeah. I shifted, trying to find the right words. That kiss. I don't know what it means. I'm not sure what we're doing here. Ethan set his phone down, crossing his arms. What do you want it to mean, James? His question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. I stared into my coffee, feeling like the walls were closing in. I don't know, I admitted. I'm still trying to figure this out. Look, Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. We can't keep dancing around this. You kissed me and yeah, it meant something. But if you're still stuck in your head about Lucas or about whatever this is, I'm not going to wait around forever. I blinked, surprised by his bluntness. I'm not asking you to wait. No, but you're asking me to sit here while you figure out your shit, he said, frustration creeping into his voice. And that's not fair? My chest tightened. Ethan, I'm not trying to. I know you're not, he cut me off, his tone softening, but the frustration was still there. But you've got to be honest with yourself about what you want. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going in circles. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. He was right. We were stuck. And I didn't know how to get us out of it. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was Lucas. Seriously, Ethan said, catching the name on my screen. I quickly silenced the phone, but the damage was done. Ethan shook his head, his lips pressed into a thin line. What does he want now? Ethan asked, his voice edged with irritation. I don't know, I said, feeling my pulse quicken. I haven't talked to him since he left. Ethan crossed his arms again, his jaw clenched. You gonna call him back? I don't know, I stammered, feeling trapped between two impossible choices. Ethan laughed bitterly. Jesus, James, you can't keep doing this. He stepped away from the counter, grabbing his keys from the table. Look, I need to clear my head. I'll be back later. He didn't wait for a response, just walked out the door, leaving me standing there, staring at my phone like it was some kind of ticking bomb. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at Lucas's name on the screen. Part of me wanted to delete the message, forget he'd ever reached out. But the other part, the part that had spent years loving him, needed to know why he was calling now, after everything. What could he possibly want? After a long moment, I unlocked the phone and opened the message. It was short, just a single sentence. "We need to talk." That was it, no apology, no explanation, just a cold, empty demand. My stomach churned, the memory of our breakup flashing in my mind, the anger, the betrayal, the way he'd shattered everything with just a few words. But Ethan's words echoed in my head too, "You've got to be honest with yourself." I had no idea what that even meant anymore. Everything felt like a mess. Ethan didn't come back that night. I stayed up late, staring at the empty apartment, wondering if I'd screwed up everything. When I finally crawled into bed, the silence was deafening. I lay there for hours, tossing and turning, Lucas's message burning in the back of my mind and the memory of Ethan's kiss lingering like a wound I couldn't heal. I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew that, either way, I'd have to face it, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. The next morning, I woke up to an empty apartment. Ethan hadn't come back, and the silence was heavier than ever. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Lucas's message on my phone. The words seemed colder now. "We need to talk." I knew this conversation had to happen, but the weight of it felt suffocating. I grabbed my phone, hesitated, and then hit call. Lucas picked up on the second ring. "James," he said, his voice as smooth and detached as ever. "Lucas," I replied, my voice tense. "What do you want?" There was a pause, and I could hear him breathing on the other end. "I've been thinking about us. About what happened." I clenched my jaw, bracing myself for whatever he was about to say. "Yeah. I made a mistake," Lucas said quietly, and just like that, the old familiar pit opened up in my stomach. I shouldn't have left like that. I didn't give us a chance to fix things. I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back, his coldness, his betrayal, the way he walked out like I was nothing. "Lucas, you didn't want to fix things. You left for someone else." I know, he admitted. But it wasn't what I thought it would be. "I miss you." The words should have meant something. They should have hit me like they used to, but instead, I felt nothing. It was like hearing an echo from a past I'd already left behind. "I don't think you do," I said, surprising even myself with the calmness in my voice. What Lucas sounded confused, thrown off by my response. "I'm not the same person you left, Lucas," I said. "I've changed. You don't get to come back now and pretend everything can go back to the way it was." There was a long silence on his end, but I wasn't done. "You hurt me," I continued. "You made me feel like I wasn't enough, and now you think just because you're ready I should be waiting here for you." That's not what he started, but I cut him off. "I'm done, Lucas," I said firmly, the finality of my words sinking in as I spoke them. "This is over. It's been over." I hung up before he could say another word, my hands shaking. I dropped the phone onto the table and let out a long, shaky breath. It felt like something had finally snapped inside me, a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying finally lifted. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Ethan came back that afternoon. I heard the door creak open, and I turned around from the kitchen sink to see him standing there, his expression unreadable. I wasn't sure if he'd come to stay or to say goodbye. "Hey," he said quietly, shutting the door behind him. "Hey," I replied, drying my hands on a towel, feeling the tension return to the room. He stayed by the door, his hands in his pockets, waiting for me to say something. "So, how did it go with Lucas?" I met his eyes, feeling the truth sit heavily on my tongue. I told him it's over. For good. Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Really?" "Yeah," I said, stepping closer. "I should have done it a long time ago." He nodded slowly, his gaze softening. "And what about us?" I swallowed, the question hanging in the air like a storm cloud. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel something for you. It's there, Ethan. It's real." Ethan's jaw tightened, and I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "James, this isn't simple. We're not simple." "I know," I said, stepping even closer, closing the space between us. "But I don't care. I want to figure this out with you." He watched me for a long moment, searching my face like he was waiting for me to say something wrong. But I stood my ground, my heart racing, knowing that this was the moment everything could change. Finally, Ethan let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. "All right," he said softly, his lips curling into a small smile. "Let's figure it out." The tension in the room dissolved in an instant, replaced by something lighter, something hopeful. We stood there for a second, both of us letting it sink in, and then, without thinking, I pulled him in and kissed him again. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. It felt right. When we finally pulled back, I grinned, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "So, tacos tonight." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "You and your late-night tacos, man." "I don't act like you don't love them," I teased, already grabbing my jacket. He grabbed his too, still smiling. "All right, let's go." As we walked out of the apartment, side by side, it felt like a new beginning. Things weren't perfect and we still had a lot to figure out, but for the first time I wasn't scared of the unknown. I was ready for it.